I have read 15 books in the month of March, and I know it's crazy, but this has been the best reading month that I've had since Throne of Glass. Every book that I put on my March TBR, I actually read, which has never happened because things always change with me in my mind. I'm like, I don't want to read this anymore. However, I read every single book within my physical TBR this month. And honestly, I think it's just because I picked up really good books this month. I don't know. And also, I had 2 series in here that absolutely took over my life and completely altered my brain chemistry. But anyways, let's get into it. Starting off this month, and if you've been following along, you probably already know what this is, but I finished the Red Rising series. Well, finished everything that is out there. I read Dark Age and Lightbringer, and I am not okay. I've already talked about the series a bit, and I don't know if I need to say this, but this is not a fluffy series. When it comes to fantasy books, sci-fi books, whatever type of series it is, typically I am drawn more to plot-driven series. This series is insane. The plot is perfection. The thing that I love the most about the series is that you are questioning everyone, even the main character, especially the main character. Every single character in this book, and I mean every single character, has flaws. And again, I mean every single character in this book is fighting for something that they truly are believing in, to their core, which makes everything in this book feel so real and so grounded, even though it's about a war in space. However, when it comes to the second series within the Red Rising trilogy, I genuinely had to put the book down so many times and just process what was happening, because the second series is so much darker than the first. And the first one is pretty dark as well, but this one, breathe. Just breathe. That is how I felt while reading these, but also highly recommend. However, honestly, just maybe wait until Pierce Brown announces Red God, because now I just feel like I'm in this place where like there's no light at the end of the tunnel of this internal damnation that I have, because I do not know what to do with my life after finishing Lightbringer. And Pierce Brown still hasn't announced Red God. So if I were you, obviously read the original trilogy, but maybe wait until he at least announces Red God to read the second series. It's going to be pretty hard though, because the first trilogy is really good and you're not going to want to read anything else. But that would be my recommendation if you have the willpower. And then I went ahead and decided to read the Lady of Darkness series, because reading one series that was so emotionally draining wasn't enough for me. So I decided to read the Lady of Darkness series, and this was the biggest surprise of the month for me. I've read the Legacy series by Melissa Roehrich, and I really liked it in a sense of it was addicting, it was toxic, it was honestly kind of like a CW show that you just can't keep your eyes off of. However, Lady of Darkness, first and foremost, so much better than the Legacy series. Second of all, this is the closest thing I have read that parallels Throne of Glass. The plot is so similar, it stands on its own, but it very much has, if there's a Venn diagram, you know, Throne of Glass, Lady of Darkness. Wait, that doesn't make sense. Here's the thing, this is like Throne of Glass, but make it dark. But not necessarily dark romance like Legacy series was. This is a dark fantasy with romance. Because while Legacy series was more enemies to frenemies with benefits, this is kind of enemies to actual love stories. The romance in here is much more, I don't want to say like wholesome, but not toxic. The Legacy series is so toxic in a fun way, but this is just, the couples and the relationships in this just feel so true, like true fated mates in a way that they like love each other. I am obsessed with this series. The plot in this is insane. Again, I would say the plot is what mimics Throne of Glass the most. There's definitely characters that I feel represent one another. I'm just gonna say this though, nothing in this world can be compared to Aelin Ashriver Galthinius. I like Scarlet. She has a couple books in here where she was absolutely insufferable. I love her in my own way. Nothing can compare to Aelin Ashriver Galthinius though. I'm just gonna say that. However, but in terms of found family, taking a rightful place upon the throne, this series is everything. And there's a lot more spicy scenes too, which is always fun. And here's the thing, I've seen Lady of Darkness here or there, so I do think it has a good amount of hype. However, I still feel like this might be one of the most underhyped series of all time. This deserves so much more hype. I am obsessed with this series. So good. And do not, I'm gonna say this twice, do not skip the Reaper novella. I was listening to the Reaper novella when I was at the gym, and I literally finished it in one session at the gym. And I am on the treadmill listening to the horrific things that the Reaper has gone through. So I'm like running while crying, while also cheering him on, while also crying, while also being very disgusted. So like, you should have seen my facial expressions at the gym. It was like, yeah, I can't reenact it, but you can maybe envision it. So yes. Though I will have to have one caveat here. Similarly to the Legacy series, I did find that the last book in the series just fell a little flat. It was satisfying, all loose ends were tied up. However, I wish there was one big battle at the end. Instead, it just felt like a lot of little fires being taken out one by one, which was a little anticlimactic. So I do wish There was more in her last books, but the series overall, so good. And honestly, I think Melissa Roehrich might be one of my new favorite auto-buy authors. I just got Tortured Souls by her. I'm a little nervous to read it though because there isn't a second book out yet, and I feel like I need to have like the next book, at least 2 books in a series before I can latch on, so I'm nervous, but I do have it. After putting myself through so much emotional damage, I needed something completely different. So I read a nonfiction / memoir, but don't worry, it's not the type of nonfiction memoir that people typically think. I went to a different route and I decided, let's do Lisa Rinna. You better believe I'm going to talk about it. This is for my Bravo girlies. I'm going to tell you this right now. If you have not watched Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, you are not going to understand 75% of this book. However, if you are a Bravo girly, this book was so fun. Ever since Lisa Rinna left the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, I think I stopped watching halfway through the season after she left, and it's just never really felt right. This feels like I've watched a new season with her in it, with all the drama that she's dropped. I'm obsessed with her. There's nothing on this planet that Lisa Rinna can do to make me dislike her. She's such an icon. So if you're looking for a good laugh, looking for some tea, this is a great palate cleanser, especially if you're like me and you just went through a lot of emotional turmoil and you just needed something completely different to just brighten up your day. Lisa Rinna is that girl. And then I read The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. Now the reason I picked this up was so random, but honestly I just saw that Taylor Swift was listening to it on audio and I want my mind to be as similar to hers. So I picked this up. I'm not gonna lie to you though, the first 20% of this book, I almost DNF'd. I have a really, really hard time with multiple POVs, especially if it's just like a standalone novel. I like to feel connected to the characters, and I think having just one book to feel connected to somebody is not enough like page space for me. So with the multiple POVs, I almost DNF'd it. However, I told myself I was going to hold on until a little bit longer. I'm very happy I did. I definitely recommend this book. I will just say this, the ending fell a little flat for me. There's a huge mystery going on with the girl that's missing at camp, and honestly, once they start to unfold all these different layers of everything that's happening at the camp and the land and the families involved, I was kind of hoping for something more, but it ended up just being like, oh, okay, so it's this. Is there anything more to that? I just kept thinking that there was going to be something more to it, and it ended up not being the case. That being said, I don't think this is bad. I would still recommend. I can see why people are conflicted with this book. Some people hate it, some people love it. I truly feel like I fall in between because in the middle of this book, I was having a really, really good time, but the beginning and the end, I was like, oh, okay. So I would still recommend, but maybe don't feel like you have to prioritize it. And then we have the book club for Troublesome Women. This is also a book I almost DNF'd, and I am so happy I did not DNF this book. Again, we had the issues with the multiple POVs, so I was kind of telling myself, I'm not sure if this book is going to be for me. Again, I held on to 40%. I don't know what it was, but something within this book just suddenly clicked with me where I suddenly felt like I was getting a warm hug from my long distance best friends. No, there's not long distance best friends in here. However, this is about women in the 60s. They read this book called The Feminine Mystique, and that was a real book during the time and had a huge influence on women and how they perceived themselves. So you have this book club of 4 housewives, and they're all kind of starting to question who they are as people, their own desires, their own wants, their own career goals. And of course, during that time, men were not helping at all. If you wanted something done, you needed approval or help from your man or your dad. To open a bank account, you needed your husband to open it. To apply for a job, you had to get an approval from a man. Women really didn't have the resources or tools to construct their own lives. So these 4 women are so beautiful in a sense of not only do they find their own desires in life, but they're also helping and supporting one another through their hopes and dreams. Well, to achieve their hopes and dreams, which like made me really sad in a way. Not sad, but it just made me, but it just reminded me of like my friendship with my friends. I have this one friend group. We all live in different places. It's so sad, but there's 4 of us and we all have very different wants and desires in life, and we all love each other so unconditionally and want to support each other so unconditionally. So this really just started to remind me of that friend group, and if you guys are watching this, I love you. But highly recommend. This is truly just a story of friendship and women owning their power. So yes. And then I picked up Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Now this has been on my TBR for the longest time, and then obviously with the movie coming out, I bumped it up, and I wish I would have read this sooner. I do not read a lot of sci-fi, or at least science-heavy science fiction books, if that makes sense. This book truly ignited a love and passion I have for science, for hard science, sciencey fiction books. I was absolutely obsessed with this. I left this book feeling like I could apply for NASA. Not actually, but there is so much math and science explained in this book, and it's almost like astrophysics for dummies in an entertaining way. He takes scientific concepts that should be so complicated and complex, and he makes them feel so simple and understandable, where like I said, I felt like I left this book feeling like a rocket scientist. Like I could build a ship to take us to space at this point. to another galaxy, to be specific. There's a side character in here that I would give my life for. I went to go see the movie, and I will say the movie is a great representation of the book. Obviously, they had to get rid of a lot of things within the book, but they still stayed as true as possible to the material. The one thing I missed from the movies was how Andy was able to explain the science behind everything that was happening within the book. You don't get those further explanations in the movie, so those were things that I missed. But I will say, after my fiance and I watched the movie, we want to name our firstborn child Rocky, so there's that. This was easily one of my favorite reads of the month. If you haven't read this already, you need to, but you need to get it on audio. This will probably be my favorite audiobook of the year. There's certain aspects in here where the narrator says Rocky's voice, and you wouldn't be able to get that from reading the book. So I 100% recommend the audiobook for this. And if you haven't seen the movie yet, you need to go see it, especially in theaters. Like, the experience of people laughing in the theaters while everything was happening, I was obsessed with. So, highly recommend, yes. And then I picked up Dear Debbie by Frida McFadden. Guys, I'm like losing hope with Frida, and it makes me so sad. I love Frida McFadden for palate cleansers because her books are typically really fast paced. There's a lot of anticipation in them. I feel like I can read them in a day. And I don't know, her recent stuff, it's just not hitting for me. This one just like felt like it lost all the anticipation, all the build-up, all the tension, because we were watching it as it was happening in real time, and there wasn't like a, oh, who is it? Who isn't it? Like, there kind of was one, but it wasn't like jaw on the floor where it was going to impact the story like that much. I don't know. It was just, something about this just didn't feel so right. I love the housewife element to it. I just don't love the execution of it. So for me, this is a no. I'm not fully out on Frida McFadden yet. I am starting to lose hope. So... And then I read True Colors by Kristen Hanna. And as you know, I love Kristen Hanna. I love her writing. I love everything about her. I have read all of Kristen Hanna's newer stuff, so I'm kind of going backwards in her catalog. And what I love about that process is you kind of see her writing grow. Like, you see where her writing started and you see where it is now. This is definitely one of those books where you could see her writing skills start to develop more. And you can see how this story inspired other stories, because there's different routes you can take within building these plots. This story is based in the 80s, and it's about 3 sisters who lost their mother when they were really young, and now they have this really complex relationship with their dad. So it's a little bit estranged, a little distant. However, they all still try to make him proud. Really, it's just a story of 3 girls who all want approval from their dad in some way, shape, or form. But the core of this story is about the relationship amongst the 3 sisters. There's 3 sisters who are very, very different. There's a lot of jealousy. There's a lot of guilt going around, which has a lot of built-up tension amongst the 3 of them, especially 2 of them. One of them's like super chill. She's like Switzerland through everything. But 2 of them, they are the epitome of passive-aggressive tension between them throughout their whole lives. And one of them has some potential love interest prospects, which causes so much drama amongst the family. There's one, and then there's another one, and one of them goes to jail. And it is really, really heartbreaking to watch the sisters not have each other's backs throughout that process. So I highly recommend this. I just love Kristen Hanna's writing. I would say this is less of a historical fiction. It's based in the 80s, but there isn't like a huge historical moment happening within this book. Lastly, I read The Conditions of Will by Jessa Hastings. Full disclaimer of this book, I purchased this book prior to the knowledge of all the controversies surrounding the author. So I'm gonna say this. Is this book worth buying in despite of the controversies surrounding the author? No, it's really not. This one just didn't really work for me. I would be lying to you, though, if I said there weren't moments that I enjoyed this book. There's a lot of damaging elements within this book, especially how she represents LGBTQ characters. And the romance just didn't really feel believable. They knew each other for a week, and someone's just going to upend his life after knowing her for a week. 1, that kind of feels creepy. 2, it feels very unbelievable. And this is a contemporary fiction, contemporary romance, and usually I like those to feel a little bit more rooted in reality. Like in my fantasy books, if they fall in love at first sight, I'm like, okay, it has to do with magic, has to do with a mating bond, and it's fantasy. This one just did not feel based in reality, and then on top of that, the representation of LGBTQ characters was, like I said, pretty harmful to write a character who inherently thinks that straight men are his. Like, you can like lay claim on a straight man and not let anybody else be with them. I just think it's hurtful. I'm having a hard time explaining myself, but to each their own. In my opinion, I would not recommend purchasing this book. Overall, this is the best reading month that I've had in a long time, and not necessarily because I've read so many books, but because I was enjoying almost every single book that I was reading. When you are reading books you are loving, you are flying through them. Or at least that was me this past month. Which is also kind of sad because now I'm like done with a lot of these worlds, and some of these were like really high anticipated reads for me, so I'm sad to be no longer anticipating them. I don't know if that even makes sense. But anyways, that's all. Toodaloo.